Good evening, everyone. It's time to get our session going for this evening. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes because sometimes it takes a while just to connect and get things figured out. I'm very excited for this this final session of four. I'm really excited for the presenters this evening. So I'm going to get started, just so we're timely with the evening. And so, but before I start, I just want to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of these lands, and all the nations and guests that call this territory, this region of Ontario, home. As treaty people, we all have the responsibility of moving forward together in peace, friendship, and respect, taking only what we need and leaving an abundance for the generations that follow us. Yeah, my name is Martin Tamlyn. Welcome back to many of you, and welcome to those who are just joining us for the first time this evening. I manage the Ignatius Old Growth Forest project here in Guelph, and the project is centered around 100 acres of protected land right on the edge of the city, and is the hope, with the help of the community, kids and volunteers and all members, to restore those lands and connect with them. The Ignatius Old Growth Forest Project is one of the many great initiatives here at the Ignatius Jesuit Center. The Jesuit Center has initiatives and programs that cultivate spiritual growth and ecological engagement, valuing creation, compassion, diversity, ecological sustainability, interfaith connections, social justice, and life as a spiritual journey. As I said, tonight is the last of those four sessions, and it's not the end. It feels like it's a full circle. We've looked at many different ways of seeing and learning about the world, in the hope that we have a more relational, more sustainable, and more reciprocal way of living. We began with how we position ourselves, unpacking our worldviews, how we come to know and value nature and knowledge. We looked at the process of reconciliation and healing relations, understanding ecosystems and the knowledge and skills needed to take care of them, and ending tonight with the power of working together. This whole project's been a collaboration. I've been so blessed, and so much learning has taken place. I mean, not just learning to take care of this world, but, you know, a lot of personal growth as well. Margaret Mead, in her quote, said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And tonight's topic of collaboration and giving back hopefully adds to that as well. The world needs all of us to step up right now and to bring all our knowledge and our passions and our gifts together. And I hope these presentations have really helped us on that journey. I'm going to hand over to Molly and get the evening started, and she'll go through some housekeeping with you. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you again, Martin. For those of you joining us again, this will be a little bit of a repeat, but welcome to those joining us for the first time. Just going over some technical points before we begin. If you have any questions for the speakers as they're presenting, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You may have noticed in the past two sessions, we ran a little bit over time, and our Q&A session at the end was cut short. So if we don't have time to get to all of the questions tonight, we will still do our best to get you the answers to whatever you have burning within you. We'll send out an email afterward in the resources and feedback. As well, in that email, there will be a Google form for tonight's session. Thank you for filling out the past three, to everybody who's taken time to consider those questions and reflect further and continue the conversation. This will be the form for this session tonight. And next week, we have one that kind of gathers all four sessions together and will be just a general overview Google form with reflection questions. So if you haven't filled out any of them yet, that would be the one to fill out if you're interested in those types of questions and just extending the conversation. Finally, this session is recorded this evening, but again, it's a webinar, so only the speakers will be recorded and the chat is not recorded. So feel free to continue the conversation in the chat. Let us know where you're from, and we will send out the recording in the email as well afterwards. We ask that you don't spread this publicly just yet, but if you're willing or interested in sharing it with maybe one other person who you know would benefit from this conversation, just send us an email and let us know who you're sharing our webinar with so we can see who's and know who's watching this evening. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first two speakers who will be collaborating on this first presentation. Sarina is a person of mixed ancestry, Métis, Ukrainian, and Irish, originally from Treaty 1 territory, currently residing in the Haldimand Tract in Kitchener, Ontario, the traditional territories of many Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Neutral, and Métis peoples. She is a daughter, an auntie, a sister, a land-based educator, a weaver, an activist, and a lifelong learner. Sarina is passionate about the well-being of all her relations, the people, animals, lands, and waters all around her. Sarina is a master's degree candidate at the University of Guelph, focused on the processes of creating and maintaining Indigenous places in an urban context. With Sarina tonight will be Dave Skene, returning from our second session. Dave is a Métis and a citizen of the Métis Nation of Ontario. He is the executive director of White Owl Native Ancestry Association, a community-based Indigenous agency that has endeavored to enhance the lives of Indigenous people in the Wellington, Dufferin, and Waterloo regions since 1975. He is one of the founding members of Wisokta Wenawak, an urban Indigenous garden collective, and has been a grassroots educational innovator for over 30 years. Leading numerous teams of Canadian youth on international education projects focused on justice and community development from an Indigenous perspective. His current focus is around issues of urban Indigenous and land sovereignty, Indigenous agricultural practices, and land-based education. So I invite Dave and Sarina to turn your cameras on, and I'll pass this over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I realize that every time Dave and I hear each other introduce ourselves, there's always like something new that I hear about him, which is cool. And we get introduced in the same circles quite a bit. So I'll just jump right into it then tonight, because we wanted to treat this more as a conversation per se. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to just chat about something that we've been reflecting on lately, and which is something that we aim to embed in the work that we do, and we encourage others to do so as well. So that's what this conversation is for tonight. You know, that is reciprocity, and reciprocity with our human relations, our more than human relations, knowledge systems, the land, kind of everything. And so from my personal opinion, and in many Indigenous understandings of the world, it is immensely important to continue to evaluate how you're enacting reciprocity in your life, given the dynamic natures of all living things. And so the way that we've come to know reciprocity, and I mean by just Dave and I don't mean to speak for all Indigenous people, is through the many systems of collaboration that we work within. And so, in fact, the reason that we're sharing this teaching today is exactly an extension of that natural collaborative relationship that we're so accustomed to, and that we generally traverse on our day-to-day basis. So now I like to think of it as a web. So within our food sharing networks, which is one large thing that we do within the Wisokta Wenawak and White Owl worlds. We collaborate among ourselves, volunteers, part-time staff, individuals who receive the gifts that we're pulling out of the gardens, our plant kin, and most importantly, the land. And so each is immensely important to the structure of the web, and each is an autonomous being that holds agency, power, and is revered for their contributions to others. And this is the idea at the heart of a gift economy. So rather than thinking about the contributions of a relation as marketable or as based in like a capitalistic and monetized mentality, each thing is seen as a gift that's being shared with you. And so in order to respect the giving entity, you must use the gift with love and respect and extend that same love that was shared with you to others. So in other words, the journey does not end with you, but it must be passed on and continued on, knowing that you are part of a much larger collaborative web. And so this is the heart of collaboration as reciprocity, passing it on. It does not end with you. And you would not be able to sustain yourself without all of those that support you. So the simplest way to recognize and revere that support is through extending it on. And so that's what we try to enact every day. For instance, I think of your breath. This is an example that I recently reflected on. And so thinking of your breath, and like, where do you get it from? And so the air you inhale that sustains you is gifted to you by our tree kin. You breathe it in and are able to function and think and do and be just in general. And so to reciprocate the gift of breath, you can breathe life into other things. And that can be literally or figuratively, or emotionally or spiritually, however that resonates with you, just kind of extending that breath on. But as long as you do something with it and it's not stagnant, because I feel like for many people, the chain ends with you once you receive something. But the point of reciprocity is to continue things on. And it's inherently linked to other important R words that we relate to as well, like respect and responsibility and relationship. You might have heard me alluding to that earlier when I was speaking, but each is so important to the others, because you need to have a kind of reciprocity that is respectful and that is responsible and that is relational. Otherwise, it's not really reciprocity. And these are ideas that are, those specific R words, those are ideas that are borrowed from an Anishinaabe scholar named Nicole Bell, but also have been informed by thousands of years of Indigenous life on Turtle Island. And so I leave you with one more thing before I pass you on to my colleague, and that is to consider the love in all of these systems. And I feel like that's kind of cliched and left out of a lot of systems of living. And in order to fully care for a world that is in so much need of that intimacy, and to ultimately care for yourselves and other loved ones, love is needed to kind of propel these relationships forward. And I think that that's really at the core of reciprocity as well, and something that I try to enact, and hopefully everybody else tries to enact moving forward, because, I think I read somewhere, what you do to the earth, you do to yourselves. So if you love yourself, you have to extend that love out to all of your relations. I know that can sound a little rambly, but that's where I'll pass it off to my colleague, Dave.
Thanks, Sarina. I think it's a great example for Sarina and I to be able to speak to you tonight about reciprocity and collaboration, as we collaborate together to talk about reciprocity. For tonight's session, I wasn't really sure what to I knew Sarina could pretty much cover everything that we could do in 20 minutes, and so I wasn't really sure where to go. So I went for a walk, and I go for a walk typically about 3 times a week to a certain place. It's a forest area here in Kitchener, where I live, and as I walked, I was kind of speaking out loud to the trees and to the plant life around me, and I was just kind of asking, what does reciprocity look like beyond the everyday things that we understand, like when it comes to land and reciprocity. And because most of the stuff that how we understand it is kind of the practical aspect. So like gardening, for example, if we care for the land, we grow, the land in turn cares for us by growing good food, good nutritious food for us. And if we go for a walk in the woods, as we're there, breathing in fresh air and everything that woods offers us, we feel better. We feel better mentally and physically, and we get rid of our stress and that kind of stuff. So we can be thankful for those things, and those are real. But I began to think about, like, what's a little deeper than that as we go, as we look at reciprocity and what the land actually offers us. And I was thinking that what an elder had said to me a few years back, that we should be asking the question, how does the land want to care for us in this idea of reciprocity? And so as I was reflecting on these things, as I was out for my walk, I thought about the idea that, like, at the heart of reciprocity is a sense of belonging. As we enact reciprocity and receive, because it's reciprocity is both the giving and the caring, but also the idea of receiving. And so as we receive from the land, and we continue to receive from the land, we begin to have a sense of belonging, like a real sense of belonging. And so as I was thinking of this, I kind of thought of 3 words. The first word was visiting, and how reciprocity doesn't work at all unless we visit. And visiting meaning, like, we see each other, we connect. There's a place of relationship where we can hear each other. And so in my understanding from some of the Métis elders I've talked to, visiting is a very significant part of how we work as Métis people, how we live out our life, is to visit each other, keep those relationships going. So one of the first things I thought of is like, as part of reciprocity to work, we have to have spaces and places where we are in relationship, and so visiting is a significant part of that. The other part, the other thing I looked at was place. As we continue to visit over and over again in places. I never get, like, the area I hike in is or walk in, it's not very big. It's not a huge area, but I never get bored of it, because there's always something new to see, always something new to hear, different sounds and fragrances. And so there's all these different things. So I can walk it 3 times a week and never be bored of it. But as I've done that, I began to really kind of feel like there's a place for me there. and this kind of this space, in a sense, has become a place. And then as that's become a place, I have a sense of belonging. And so whenever there's a sense of belonging, there's this aspect of community that's developed. And so this particular place is now a part of my community. It's a place where I go to kind of dump off some of my stress, but it's also a place I go to hear important things about myself as well. And so there's this whole relationship that develops as I visit, and that place I visit becomes a place where I belong. And then as that happens, reciprocity becomes very natural. I'm continually wanting to give something back. And so it becomes a natural reaction. And another word that kind of popped in right at the end of my walk was just because I think sometimes we see reciprocity as a bit of a mechanical thing. I'm going to give something, or I'm going to take something, so I give something. But when reciprocity actually becomes sharing, that sharing of giving and receiving, there's some real significance in there. And as we begin to enact reciprocity, or as we begin to share ourselves with the land, I believe we begin to learn how the land wants to share itself with us. And so that's pretty much all I got from my walk today, and that I have to share. I wanted to keep it short. Anything else, Sarina?
No, I think that was great. I always love how your stories come out of your walks. Yeah, and I didn't intend for this to be long either. I know we have a lot of other people to hear from, so we can pass the microphone back.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That was wonderful. I think we were all pretty captivated listening to that, and hopefully have something to think about going forward. Next, I would like to introduce Tim. Tim is a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo in social and ecological sustainability. His work focuses on participation in ecological restoration. His research draws on the work of Ivan Illich in an effort to re-envision ecological restoration as a convivial, community-led process. He is currently the communications manager for Reap Green Solutions, an environmental charity focused on helping people live sustainably in Waterloo region and beyond. So Tim, I would like to invite you to turn your camera on and go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Thanks so much to Dave and Sarina for starting us off. It's a very tough act to follow. I'm afraid my presentation is going to be much more dry, but hopefully there will be some useful pieces in it. So I am a PhD candidate, and my research focuses on getting people engaged and involved in ecological restoration. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about a small piece of my research. I did what's called a systematic review, which is where I looked at almost every study, as many studies as I could find, that look at the motivations of volunteers. And I did this because I'm interested in how to recruit and to keep volunteers. What is it that motivates them to come out and to keep coming out, specifically for ecological restoration or environmental projects? So before I get into some reflections on my study, I want to tell a story about volunteering, and it's about a time that I volunteered. I volunteered to remove Phragmites. And this is a picture of some Phragmites that I pulled off the internet in case anyone doesn't know what they are. They're massive, massive reed that's taller than I am. And they're an invasive plant in Ontario, and they take over wetlands and have all kinds of bad effects. So there was a local land trust that I'm not going to name, and they had a posting that said, we want some volunteers to come out. And so I signed up online, and then I showed up at the office, and nobody knew what to do with me. The person who I was supposed to meet was not there, and there was a lot of confusion about, oh, there's somebody here to volunteer. Finally, the person who I was supposed to meet did come. And, despite that I signed up early, this person said, oh, I didn't think you had registered for today, but I had. And so we went out after taking some time to find some shovels and get oriented. And it was just me and this person. And we started spading these Phragmites, and it's really tough work. But the entire time, this person who was an ecologist kept saying, well, it's not really worth our effort to dig these out. They're just all going to come back next year. I brought a whole school group out here, and we dug all of these out last year, and they all just came back. So I persisted for about an hour or so. And we got through a bunch of it with similar, conversations like that. And I kind of walked away and said, okay, I'll see you later. During it, we had some good conversations about goats. You can use goats to eat Phragmites. And I actually followed up by email, and I was like, hey, here's some research about goats and using them to control this. About 6 months later, I got an email from that person saying, I'm applying for a grant. Can you send me that research again? And I sent it, and then I never heard anything. And I followed up and I said, I'd really like to, continue to be involved or help out. Didn't hear anything back. And they ended up getting the goats and going through with the project and everything like that. But the reason why I tell that story is because that's actually what got me started on this journey. I went through that, and there may be many reasons why it was such a rough experience, but I started thinking, this is not how you engage people in restoring ecosystems. So I went to school and found an advisor and began this project to figure out what is the things that motivate people. What are the things that motivate people to get going on this? And how can we improve these volunteer experiences so that people feel fulfilled and connected and empowered to do this kind of work? Because it's hard work to do. So what I did was called a systematic review. And this diagram shows you roughly what it looks like. Basically, I searched all of the studies that use the words ecological restoration, volunteer, and motivation. And that ended up being about 1,000 papers in academic journal databases. I filtered through those papers. I read all of the abstracts for all of those papers and found that about 95 of them responded to my specific research question and looked directly at the motivations of volunteers. So I read those 95 papers and I coded them. And what that means is I'm taking quotes and I'm assigning different codes to them. I'm saying, this motivation is care for the environment. This motivation is career advancement. And right now what I'm doing is I'm analyzing that data. So I have more than 1,000 data points that I'm going to sift through and correlate and all of those fun academic things. The activities in these papers range from doing gardening to counting birds to citizen science type initiatives, invasive species removal, oyster gardening, was a specific type of gardening that happens in New York. It's really cool. You get a plot of oysters on the shore and that's your plot that you tend to and care for. So out of doing all of this research and reading all of these papers, there are some clear lessons that have come up. I'm going to apologize in advance to any academics who are on this call because I'm still in the reflecting phase. These are not verified research findings. These are just my notes that have come out of reading 95 of these papers and trying to connect the dots. One of the biggest connections that I found is that the biggest barrier that people face to volunteering is time. They it came up over and over and over again, is that they don't have time to volunteer. And that's pretty common, and a difficult thing to overcome. It is a bit of a luxury to give away your time for free to a cause. Found that volunteers actually come in all ages and types of education. I did tag the demographics in the studies, and you'll find, a whole wide range. You might think, oh, it's mainly retired or older people who have more time on their hands, but it was fairly evenly split, and education as well. I mean, there was a range of educations that were present. Men and women show up fairly equally in the demographics of volunteers, but something that was clear is that volunteers are mainly white. Where they did track the demographics in these studies, the ethnicity of people, usually self-reported on a survey or something like that, it would be 95 to 100% identifying as white in the response, or Caucasian, and that could also mean that those are the populations that are studied. There could be a lot of reasons for that, but I think it's an important thing to consider in volunteering and running these programs. A lot of them tend to have high incomes as well, or what we would consider higher incomes, middle income and above, and university educations. Although, as I said, there was a range of that. One of the big things we found, and what I'm really going to drill into a little bit here, is motivation changes over time. So what gets people involved in the beginning, what gets them to come out for that first thing, is different from what keeps them involved. So if you're running a volunteer program or you're trying to work with volunteers, it's important to keep in mind that you might not want to offer the same thing to a volunteer who's coming back for their 10th time versus one who's coming for the first time, because they might be in it for different reasons. They might be having different motivations at that time. So really there's two phases. There's getting involved, and then there's staying involved, that like long-term volunteer who sticks around. And there are things you can do as volunteer managers that increase the likelihood of people staying around, or even as people who are working in organizations that have volunteers or in volunteer groups, you can increase the likelihood of people coming out repeatedly, which is good. That's what you want, to have a lot of really reliable volunteers. So what gets people involved? The main thing is contributing to conservation. This seems really obvious. And one of the things that research is great at is telling us what we already know, what we intuitively know. But the key here is that contributing piece. So that story that I told you in the beginning, anyone who's dug Phragmites out will know that it is not very rewarding work. It's really hard. And when you start doing it, you realize just how long it's going to take you to finish this big field. So it can actually be a little bit demotivating. So with volunteers, when you're managing or interacting with them, it's really important to emphasize that they are making a contribution by being there, that their efforts are worthwhile. And to maybe highlight that with some statistics or some figures or things like that. There's a community compost group in New York that has a huddle after every day and reviews, what they did today, how much compost they moved, how significant that is in reducing waste in the waste stream. It's really important to underscore those, even if it seems obvious. So people want to contribute to something. In citizen science, they wanted to contribute to the science. Some groups use the language conservation, contributing to conservation. It was expressed also as care for the environment. That's a motivation. They want to do something that's caring for the environment. So if you're in a position of authority, or you're somebody who is trying to get volunteers to come out, you can really increase the likelihood that they will do that by appealing to this motivation, by saying, if you come and do our thing, you will be caring for the environment. So we really need to think deeply about how can we make volunteers feel like their contribution matters. We may know it does, and we may be behind the work, but it's important to underscore that for them and really highlight it. The other thing to keep in mind is how do hierarchies like staff versus volunteers, how do those affect people's feelings of contributing? If they're referred to as just volunteers, then they may feel like they're not contributing as much as a staff member. There's a great organization in town in Kitchener called the Working Center, and they run a community supported agriculture garden, and everyone there is called gardeners. Whether you work there, you're volunteering there for a day, whatever, you're a gardener. So something like that can really make everyone feel like they're equal and they're contributing equally. The second thing, major motivation, is learning. People are genuinely curious about the outside world. People want to know, the names of plants and the different processes that happen in an ecosystem. It's sometimes connected to career aspirations. I mentioned, I made a bit of a career change when I did that volunteering. That's really common, super common for people to get a little bit of field experience that way and try out a different career. But generally, it's just human curiosity and wanting to know. Sometimes it's also about teaching others, spreading awareness to other people. And often it's just about knowing the world better. So by understanding this motivation, this learning piece, you might think, well, maybe I could include like a 10-minute workshop before, or I could include a little piece about identifying trees, even if we're just picking up garbage. Because I think, the research shows that people are motivated by learning something, by getting something of value. There's this language that they use in the volunteering research where they say volunteers are impure altruists, which means that they are doing something nice, but they want something in return. And what they want in a lot of cases is knowledge. And so by keeping that motivation in mind, you can really help get more people involved with just a little bit of effort. So then we shift to thinking about what keeps people involved. So once they're in the door, they've come out to a few projects, what determines whether they're going to stick around? And one of the main features is project organization. So remember that story I told in the middle, at the beginning of this workshop, how they didn't know I was coming, they didn't know what to do with me. A little bit of awareness in that organization could have gone a long way in terms of treating volunteers and setting things up for them. And this could also mean, organizing the experiences. So if you are getting people to plant trees, do you have enough shovels? Do you have enough soil? Do you have it arranged in such a way that people aren't going to be running into each other? Have you planned for the amount of time that it's going to take? Planned for lunch, planned for snacks, stuff like that. These show people that the project is organized. And if every volunteer has a clear task, they know what to do. If anyone's ever helped a friend move, I have this experience more often than I think is normal, but you help a friend move and you show up and nothing's in boxes and you're like, what can I do to help? And they're like, oh, I don't know. We'll just kind of get it there. There's a lot of volunteer experiences that happen like that, where volunteers show up and then the staff is trying to figure out at that moment, what do we do with all these people? It's important to have these clearly defined tasks that really contributes to project organization. And keeping your training short, accessible, and useful and on task. This is really key to giving the appearance of an organized project. You also want to make sure that the whole program is organized. So do you have a pathway for people to advance or to level up in your program in a way if they want to take on more responsibility? Are you following up with them? Things like that can really keep people engaged. We call this sometimes the ladder of engagement. So somebody might start out planting trees, but it's always good to consider how you can move people up that ladder and give opportunities for them to become more involved and expand their skills and contribute more to the project. The other thing that keeps people involved, again, this seems obvious, but it's really important to make some space for it, is social factors. Connections between the volunteers are really important for keeping people coming back. Connections with the staff and organization can fill this role too. You want to create space. So if you have kind of traditions or rituals or like those trappings of social groups that really bond people together, that can go a long way towards creating those social connections. So maybe, I don't know, if you're doing a tree planting, everyone plants the last tree all together. You know, we all put in one thing of soil and that's the last tree and we're doing it together. Something simple like that takes a few minutes and it really bonds people. It can have that effect. So again, try to leave space for these social connections. Sometimes it's as simple as not starting right away, giving people 5 or 10 minutes to get to know each other, and not rushing people out of there or leaving yourself if you're organizing the activity. So giving them 5 or 10 minutes to hang out. These can really go a long way towards keeping people involved. We all like hanging out with our friends, and it makes hard work a lot easier. Names, external memberships. So Earth Rangers is really good. That's a kids program, but calling people something, like how I mentioned the Working Center calls everyone gardeners at the garden. You're a gardener, that's an identity, a kind of social thing that you're doing together. So to sum it up, and I think I'm hopefully under 20 minutes, if you want to get people involved, make it clear that their contribution matters to conservation, to the environment, to whatever language you want to use, but make it clear that their 1 hour of time there, that matters, that makes a difference. Provide lots of learning opportunities, both formal and informal. So by that, I mean, you might set up a training at the beginning, but maybe if you're milling about with volunteers, you'll share some facts or some knowledge, or you'll say, hey, I know what that plant is, or do you know what that plant is? But if you provide these learning opportunities, that can be really motivating for people. If you want to keep them involved, make sure your project is organized or it appears organized. Provide opportunities for social connections. That's really, really important, and it can be done in any way that you would like, but any way that you can leave space for these volunteers to get to know each other and talk to each other will go a long way towards keeping them involved. So to conclude, I want to give you a good example of volunteering, and this is Martin at Ignatius. I have a small conflict here because I did help set up this particular day. But here Martin's teaching people how to plant a tree. Some of them might have planted trees before, but by teaching it, Martin's giving a little bit of knowledge. He's giving his experience. You'll notice that Martin has gloves and a shovel. There were gloves and shovels for everyone there. There's buckets beside the mulch. Everyone was given a clear, task. Find a tree and plant it. And it was very straightforwardly run. One of the other things that Ignatius does that speaks to that social aspect during the before COVID times, there's a Christmas dinner for volunteers where I've personally met other volunteers there. I was a volunteer first at Ignatius and got to know them and hear their story. And it's a really good example of how to kind of structure an experience so that people keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And eventually you ask them to do a webinar and they come and they do a webinar, and here I am. So that's what I've got. I noticed there's a lot of activity in the chat, but I guess we'll get to that later. So thank you all for your time and attention this evening. And hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, as Patrick said, we were just talking about how Martin hits on every one of the things that you mentioned for working with volunteers. That's great. It's good to have you back as a volunteer and now a speaker. So next, I would like to introduce Judith Jones. Judith is an environmental consultant and owner of Winter Spider Eco Consulting, where she works with clients from all sectors, private, government, and First Nations. She has extensive experience with surveys of plants, birds, wildlife, vegetation, species at risk, and preparing balanced development, management, conservation, and recovery recommendations. She currently coordinates the Manitoulin Phragmites project, which aims to bring invasive Phragmites under control across the Manitoulin district. The project has successfully controlled or eradicated Phragmites at more than 90 sites with help of ongoing volunteer stewardship. So welcome, Judith. I'll pass this over to you now.
This is great. I've learned so much already about what I do and what I don't do. I didn't know why it worked, but yes. So let me just share my screen here. Oh no, please. I hope I don't get bounced out. I had to run downstairs and tell the kids to get off the internet. You have to just do this. Everybody still hears me? Yes? I'm not hearing anything.
We can still hear you.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, there.
I don't want this to be screen share or full screen. Okay, well, maybe we'll just go with it here. Maybe one more minute. Well, so you'll see my desktop now and then. Okay, so I'm the coordinator of the Manitoulin Phragmites project. That's me and Matt. We actually do have a good time at this, and we actually do get rid of it. So Tim, you're invited to come and help us. This is our 7th year of work. We're on Manitoulin Island. In case you don't know where Manitoulin Island is, that's where it is. It looks like just a little piece of land in the middle of Lake Huron, but it's actually quite big when you're in a car trying to go across it. This is not working for me. Let's get this. So this is a landscape-wide program to get rid of Phragmites. It's all of Manitoulin Island, plus Copenhagen, plus some of the surrounding islands. Sorry, I'm doing a very bad job at this. This isn't the what is Phragmites talk. It's not what is Phragmites, why is it bad, why should we get rid of it? You can find that talk in other places, and we will have that talk actually up on YouTube this winter. But I'll have to tell you a little tiny bit about Phragmites just so you understand about my project. People started stopping me in the grocery store and saying, what is all this stuff on my beach, Judith? What should we do about it? So I went out and looked at it, and I work part-time in Wikwemkong. And this is one of my colleagues here, and he's 6'2". And when I took this picture in 2011, I thought this was really alarming. Now I look at it and think, oh yeah, we could clean that up in a few hours. But I did what everybody does. I said, well, let's study it first. So I track logged a bunch of patches of Phragmites, and you can see yellow is 2011 and red is 2013. And we found out that they doubled in size in nearly 2 years. And then I went to Windsor. The same picture, Tim, right? Only you only had part of it. I actually saw this in Windsor, and I came home and said, we cannot have that on Manitoulin Island. We just can't. And the first 2 talks about reciprocity and the love, I love Manitoulin Island. I'm not going to let that happen to it. And in order for you to know something about what's at stake, if you've never been to Manitoulin Island, we have this, and we also have this, and we also have this. We can't have Phragmites destroy these things. And we also have this. And I have, slides are recycled from other talks, but I have this one in there because a lot of people don't understand that wetlands are valuable to human beings. They're not places you like to go. You don't want your boots to sink and get stuck in this. But this is where the water goes when it rains so that it doesn't go in your basement. This is where you get groundwater, where rainwater goes into the ground so that you can have good drinking water. These places are invaluable to us. We can't have them taken over by Phragmites. So how does it spread? I have to tell you very quickly how it spreads. It's mostly spread by human beings. People always ask me whether ducks spread the seeds. Most of the time we see Phragmites in places where there has been machinery and ATVs. And you can see, that's my hand, and see all the little nodes here. I don't know if you see my cursor, but all the little nodes there have little roots coming out of them. And the main way it's spread is by the guck that gets stuck in tire, that gets stuck on machinery. So there's a picture of an ATV. We see this all the time. The ATV drives down the ditch, goes through Phragmites, and the pieces fall off, and then you get new patches of Phragmites. And it's also spread by boats. So our message is, if you're going to boat through a bunch of weeds, and then you lift up the motor and you pull off the stuff, and don't throw it back in the water, throw it in the boat, and then you can dispose of it on land. A wicked root system, which is one reason why you can't just take an excavator and dig it up, because you can never get all the roots out. It also has big long runners. I had one that was 8 long, and each little node has a little sprout coming off of it. It's a really formidable enemy. There it is in the wintertime. Seeds are still on the plants. You take a snow machine through it, you get seeds all over the snow machine, you drive along. It's also allelopathic. I teach people this word because what it means is a plant that can secrete toxins into the soil that inhibits the growth of other plants. And all this eventually adds up to the loss of a natural habitat. So here's a picture I accidentally took in 2014 because I just wanted a picture of what the quads were doing on the muddy beach. And there's us 3-4 years later. That's me in the hat. So what would do to combat this? After I saw this, what are we going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? What's one little Judith Jones going to do about it? So there is a best management practices document, and best management practices can apply to anything. It's basically what works for something and what doesn't work. You could have best management practices for, how to grow a good garden. These are the best management practices for what to do about Phragmites. Don't try everything because some things don't work. You might as well save your effort. So enough of it already. What can we do about it? That's my staff there. Well, that's my staff there doing some cutting. What would work? It started with a 2-pronged approach. One prong is some people to do the grunt work on the ground, the physical grunt work, and also teach people to stop the spread and to do the control themselves. Because Manitoulin's a big place and Phragmites is always going to be here. It's always going to come from somewhere. So what we have to do is figure out a way to maintain it after we can get it under control. So that's my field team there in Wiki. These guys work hard. I have a team of 3, sometimes 4 seasonal staff, and they're awesome. They're just fantastic people. And we have tools that we use. We have cane cutters and sleds and gas-powered brush cutters, and we use these things. You can cut a lot. You can cut a lot with a brush cutter, but it's limited by how much you can carry out of the water in a day, because you have to carry it all out of the water, because if it floats away, it'll sprout somewhere else. So we're limited by that. We also work with the Invasive Phragmites Control Center with their amazing machinery. They have these floating cutters that can cut hectares. I'm trying to go a little faster because I've got too many slides here. And yes, we also do use herbicide as a weapon of last resort, because sometimes it comes down to the decision of a small amount of herbicide or the loss of a natural habitat. And you have to weigh this carefully, which is the lesser of the evils. Okay, so we're getting rid of it. So how do we get people to help us and to get them to stop spreading it and to get them involved in a way that they will continue to stay involved and will care for Manitoulin Island as much as I do and keep on this? How will I, who will not be around here in 50 years, make sure that this stays? So the first thing that we did is we started an info pamphlet, which you will get at the end if you want it. It can be handed out. So that every time somebody stopped us on the road and said, "What are you guys doing in there?" we gave them a pamphlet and we stopped what we were doing and we talked to them and said, "Look, you see that stuff? Look at what it can do. See these pictures on this pamphlet? These are all pictures from Manitoulin Island. This could happen to your beach." And then we also started Manitoulin Phragmites Week. It's the 3rd week of July every year. This will be our 6th year of it. And in that week, it's a little tougher with COVID now, but we have demonstrations of control techniques. We make house calls, we make info sections and presentations, And we basically get everybody out. And the idea is that if this week pops up every year on the radar somehow from now on, people will say, oh yeah, Phragmites week, we better go check and see if our frag is still there, or if it came back, we better go see if it, we need to do any work down there. So if this pops up on the radar every year, then people will go and do something about it, hopefully. So we advertise that it's Frag Week, and we ask people to report frag to us. And even just the act of reporting it somewhere local and knowing that somebody's going to come out and do something gets people engaged, because, oh, somebody will come and check my beach. Okay. And then we come and we talk with them and we say, okay, yeah, how long has this been here? Have you done anything to it yet? Well, look, here's what you can do. So, okay, I'm just catching myself up on my notes here in case I forgot something. Okay, so the first year of Manitoulin Phragmites Week, we had more than 100 people volunteer. People were really interested to know what's going on their own beaches. And Tim was right about wanting a little education. Yeah. So we also now have a 7-minute YouTube video, so that once we talk to landowners and we say, look, we'll get this started for you, we'll get it under control, and then, you can just take care of it after that. And then later on, they're like, well, what did she say? So we now have it up on YouTube. That's me getting filmed there on how to do Phragmites. And we also have a lot of ads now, because since the water level in the Great Lakes is going down again and the shoreline is exposed a little more and people are going back to driving around on it with their machinery and their ATVs, there's going to be a lot more Phragmites popping back up again. So we've been doing a lot of advertising about it. There's a slide here that seems to be missing about the goal of the project. I'm just going to circle back for a minute. I'm doing a bad job tonight. Sorry. Here it is. Yes. So we started the Manitoulin Phragmites project. That's me in the hat. And the idea is to eradicate and control Phragmites across Manitoulin Island, and to give everyone knowledge and capability to control Phragmites. And the idea, why is this not working right tonight, is to reduce Phragmites across Manitoulin Island to a low enough level that it can be kept under control by ordinary people with a little bit of annual maintenance. And that annual maintenance will pop up on the radar during Phragmites Week. And here's some volunteers doing that little bit of annual maintenance. So what we do is we go around the island doing the grunt work. We get the sites under control, or we come out and visit landowners and help them get it under control. And then we hand the sites back to a volunteer steward, a landowner usually, or sometimes a volunteer who really cares about a place. And we say, okay, we've trained you what to do. You know what Phragmites looks like. And if any of it comes back, get on it right away. If there's 3 stems that come back, you know exactly what to do. And that way, these people, they're caring for this place. They have a sense of ownership of the place. They're watching for it. And if it comes back, they know exactly what to do and can do it right away. And if they can't handle it, they can call us back. Let's fast back to where we were. So this is our 7th year of work. And as Molly said, we've done about 91 different locations here. The green is all under control. We've done the entire Lake Huron shoreline of Manitoulin Island, plus most of the shoreline of South Bay. And we're just starting the red parts, which is the North Channel mainly. And yeah, I feel so great about it. There's some places when I see them, I just want to cry because they look so beautiful. And believe it or not, Tim, we have fun doing this. People come and have a lot of fun with it. I don't, sometimes I'm amazed at how much they like it and how they keep coming back to help us, but we do have a really good time. I got this email this year from a guy who came out to volunteer with us. I wasn't there that day. And he sent me this email that said, lunch on the causeway to Barry Island, had a great time, killed some frag, Ken. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our success. So this is the site I showed you at the beginning. This is what happened to it in 2016. This is us trying to start controlling it in 2017. This is what we ended up doing. You can see there's 4 guys with brush cutters there. There's the truxer cutting machine from the Invasive Phragmites Control Center. And this is it last year. I didn't have a picture of it this year, but this is it last year. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. So it works. It does. It works. This is the mouth of Blue Jay Creek on the Lake Huron side of Manitoulin Island. That's all Phragmites there. When we started in this bay at Michael's Bay, there were 17 hectares of nothing but Phragmites. And now it looks like this. So every piece, sweat and stress and all the things that we do, it's all worth it. It's so worth it. So I just wanted to add a couple of more comments. I'm almost done. What we do is we try to get this manageable enough so that our volunteers have a small job that they can handle, that they feel good about. People do want to do something for the environment, but they often don't know exactly what. So what we do is we train them to do something very specific that is really needed. And they also enjoy doing it. In my opinion, we need to work more for Earth in a landscape-wide basis, not just on our own property, but on a whole landscape-wide basis, working together. I've taken on all of Manitoulin Island, and all of Manitoulin Island is private property. There's no crown land. There are little provincial parks, but this is all working with private landowners and their neighbors. And people enjoy doing this because it gets people out to work together. So if you can call the landowners and bring people together and get them to do something together, they'll have a good time at it. This does more than just Phragmites. With this project, I'm not preaching to the choir. I'm reaching people who don't like conservation, who don't like tree huggers. And I'm reaching out and making relationships with people I never thought would speak with me. Sometimes I say, hit them where they fish, right? Because people say, wow, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I think, do you fish? And they say, yeah. I say, okay, there's your fish spawning habitat. There's a way to engage them on their level and whatever it is that interests them. So I want to give you some signs that the project works. We've got 90 sites that are clear of Phragmites. Most of these are eradicated. A few of them are still being maintained. Control is different than eradication, but a few of them are being maintained, but most of them are eradicated. More than 40 of our sites have volunteer stewards. So those are people who have agreed to take over a site and maintain it in perpetuity. We started a fundraiser last year because we didn't have a lot of funding. And to my shock, we raised $6,000 just from our own little local community, which was amazing. And most of all, the success is the pictures that you've just seen of how great things look. So this is the shut up and stop talking slide. She's jumping rope with a root there. And these are our sponsors. And I think this model of working together and taking on something as a landscape and getting people out to do something together is a very good model. It could be applied to a lot of things, not just Phragmites. If anybody finds a way to apply it to the emerald ash borer, please call me immediately. Thanks. Sorry, I was so scatterbrained on this tonight. I should have printed out my notes.
Judith, that was amazing. You did not seem scatterbrained at all. Thank you very much for sharing. Very informative, and I think it followed up Tim's information very nicely. So thank you for sharing tonight.
If anybody wants to come to Manitoulin Island next summer to help us with Phragmites, we're outside. You don't have to wear a mask. We're COVID safe. Please come.
Yes, Judith, just quickly before you finish, when is Phragmites Week in 2022?
I think it was on that slide. It's the third week of July, starting on the Saturday. Hang on a second here. I just closed it. Oh, where is it? Here it is. It is the 16th through the 22nd of July.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. So thank you for your sharing. We have one final speaker tonight, welcoming back Martin Tamlyn, who is a community builder and teacher focused on restoration ecology within a decolonized framework. Originally trained as an elementary school teacher, he has spent the last 20 years dedicated to climate change mitigation action. He has designed and led programs in environmental home building, forest gardening, permaculture design, sustainable farming, and ecology. He currently manages the Ignatius Old Growth Forest Project, where he facilitates community-led ecological restoration and nature connection programs. So Martin, please end us off.
Thank you so much, Molly. I'm going to share my screen as well. The presenters haven't spoken to each other tonight, and just the synergy and the threads that run through all these things. I was going to start off with my presentation with the kind of notion of all the things that we need to consider when working with volunteers, as far as the sense of belonging, turning up, getting to know places, building community, learning, all the resources and supports needed, and all the partnerships and relationships, and all those different things. So because of time, I thought maybe I'll skip that bit, but everyone seemed to have done that job for me, so I don't mind skipping it. But I will put it on the screen so that when if you want to go back and look at the recording, there's always so much information in these sessions. Then that information is right there for you. So here we go. Yeah, so it's all about creative engagement and ecosystem restoration. So I'm just going to kind of give lots of just really practical examples of different things you can do that really bring in those volunteers and keep those volunteers. And I think I saw Marianne join us this evening, and she's been coming back for years. So we must be doing something right. So here we go. A couple of years ago, I worked with the university, and we did CESI is the Community Engagement Scholarship Institute, and they kind of link students up to what things are going on for real in the community, and what kind of supports or research are needed to help the students learn in a real environment, but also give back to those partners in the community. And the review of looking at ecological restoration, these are all the things that were needed. And Tim spoke to these, and Dave and Sarina and Judith. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to kind of flip through those, but it's there on your screen if you want to go through it. And then how those kind of then act out actually during these activities. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there that relate to motivations, empowering people, removing barriers of participation, and all the collaborations that you need and can use to make all this happen. So that's all there. So what I'm going to just do is go through all these different examples, and then and maybe speak to each of some of these things as we go. So this is really neat. So with I'm going to give some examples of working with kids. We're a retreat center, so we work with retreatants, we work with volunteers and corporate groups and all sorts of different things. And it's always really nice to kind of capture to see what their experiences were. So this is a few things from our nature activities. And I love the one, I found my happy place. It was such a sense of belonging. And some of these kids that come out, and some people that volunteer have never actually been in these spaces. So it's really important how we do it. Just like Tim talked about his experience, you really want people to come back and it to be really positive and really fun and really just learning and everything about it. I mean, even just being in nature itself is also really, really good. And then we work. This is the Wellington Guelph Public Health before COVID hit. So I'm glad they came to the forest before all this went down. And it was all these amazing things that came out of it. The staff interactions, remembering their childhood, they coming across these places in the first place, and just bringing back this remembrance. I talked about this in the first session about this, like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about all these things. I forgot about all those joys and kinship that I had as a child. And these kind of things come back. And then for the retreatants, so these different dimensions to what we do is, it is even what Mackenzie talked about in the first session, that mind, heart, and body and spirit, and with the range of experiences you can provide all those things. I love that one, not to be an observer and passerby, but being a participant. I think that's really key. and so it means building relationship. It means getting to know plant names and all the great things that Tim was talking about. And so I'm going to go through each one. And I'm going to break it down a little bit. So what we got here, excuse me, is a nature interpretation bit. I like to talk a lot, so it's an ideal job for me. And I'm also really passionate about nature. So my favorite thing to do is to take people through the woods and share my excitement and passion. And it rubs off on people. It really does, So seeing how, here I'm just demonstrating the connectivity of the importance of the Old Growth Forest Project and refilling in these spaces and the connectivity for the animals and the corridors that they traverse. Here is Larry Halleck talking to, I think it was a conference on watershed health. So telling the story of the removal of the dam at the Ignatius Jesuit Center and the return of the brook trout. This stream had been dammed since 1832. So yeah, so by telling that story and sharing, people remember as well. When things are a narrative, then people tend to remember things more. Now we look at volunteers. Now with volunteers, there's a whole bunch of work to be done in this world. So you're never short of jobs, that's for sure. But then also the season really dictates what kind of jobs you get into. So luckily, as a season changes, the job changes as well. I mean, really, if I had volunteers, I could just get them, this is removing common buckthorn from the understory of the forest. We could do that for months, really, but then do you think they'll come back? Do you think it's like, no. I know that I need to get this out of here, but I also want you to keep coming back and learning and doing all these different things. So early in the spring, the forest is still open, so we can go in and start our work on invasive species. As the season moves on, here's some students here. There's Marianne in the background, actually. And so here we are planting meadows. These two young lads here, it's funny, it started off because they said, oh, hang on a minute, I can get my community hours for high school with you as well, can I? And they're just from the local community. And so they kept coming and they kept coming. And then I was like, well, you've done your hours already now, boys. And Peyton in the middle here said, well, the earth needs people like me, so I'm just going to keep coming. so rewarding, so great. And then as the season moved on, sorry, Patrick, you're hiding behind a cedar tree there. We went into kind of like the window for working in streams, so we could go in and do some stream rehabilitation, especially if it's like stinking hot as well. And you can see, and you can basically play in the water and change the dynamics and do some really positive stuff. And be kind of really playful about it as well. The nice thing about working with, in the rivers is that you actually see the results of reactions almost instantaneously. So seeing and like Tim was saying, like knowing how important your contribution is, when you're working with stream rehabilitation, then it's actually happens right in front of you. It's amazing, very dynamic. Here we are, Judith, Phragmites. I can't stand it. My kids couldn't say that when they were younger. They always said, oh, Freddie Mercury's dad. And so they kind of continue with that because they couldn't say Phragmites. But here we are. We flattened it and we're solarizing it in a smaller area and killing it off in that way. So every situation is different. But these are still the same volunteers as we've gone through the season. We're into like early September now. We have Guelph Community Living would come out now, not since COVID, some of those programs ended, unfortunately, but they would come out every week, and there's little contributions every week would add up. And I know all the trees and all the mulching that's taken place by these amazing people. And then that kind of like having those moments of social and reflection and always gratitude. So this is the end of the season, sharing a fire together and sharing our reflections. And saying goodbye for the winter really as well. But it's just such an important aspect. And because when you come out to such a beautiful place by the rivers, in the meadows, in the forests, you have to give space to people to enjoy that too. It's not just like I'm cracking a whip and let's get all this done and then head off home. I'd witnessed that before, and it's like, no, this is not what it's about. And so the social aspects have been really, really important. And then so that was a volunteer. So there was just a couple of hours a week, every week, come if you can, so you have to kind of provide things. It was later in the afternoon, so the students could do it after work. you have to provide these different times and then weekend stuff as well, which takes away those time barriers that Tim talked about. And even the most mundane jobs, here we are flattening Phragmites. When you do something together towards a common goal, common good, all the camaraderie, all that stuff, and achieving something, it's amazing. Everyone, like, even if it was a really muddy day and we planted trees and stuff like that, everyone had the best time ever squashing Phragmites. And here we are at the end. Such pride in our work. It was awesome. And these folks are from a church community right down Front Street in Spadina in downtown Toronto, and they came out for the morning. So then we saw our one-off events, you know, a workshop. So depending on people's interests, whether it's in animals or whether it's plants, whether it's invasives or it's just, you know, education. This is we wanted to make wood duck boxes, you know, to go around the side of the streams and the rivers. So we made them, and we had someone from Ducks Unlimited come and talk to us as well. So we're collaborating with our knowledge and our knowledge sharing. This is one event. It's my my little daughter and my little boy there. They're much older already, but so much fun. We came together. We worked with Trout Unlimited and their local chapter, Speed River chapter, and did a lot of work repairing the Martin Creek even further to make it even better for fish habitat. So run cleaner, gravel, colder, all those wonderful things. And it's so great. Parents with their kids, older, younger folks, and it's just so wonderful. Here we are collaborating with the Green Legacy. So Jessica is really knowledgeable about seed collecting. People really want to know about how to collect tree seeds and how to propagate them. So this whole process here, we came out and we've done this a couple of times. And the Green Legacy are also really looking for volunteers as well. So it's kind of like this cross-pollination where we're training volunteers to become seed collectors, which then can collect seeds and bring them to the tree nursery in the county and then come back to the land. The trees that we've planted on the land are now producing seeds already. So that's a whole full circle. Here's another frag person. I'm not sure if you know her, Judith, Lynn Short. She calls herself the Frag Hag. So there was like this training as well. This is a community group. This is Guelph Donkey Sanctuary folks. They had some invasive species work, so they brought volunteers out to train up so they can look after their own land. This is us talking about Phragmites again over here. Doug Larson here. He actually takes buckthorn and makes fretboards for guitars and all sorts of wonderful stuff. And there's Lynn again. So it is like just lots of collaboration in knowledge and bringing out people and trying to create that narrative. This is great. So we had a moth evening as well. So we set up black lights down by the creek, and that's where the moths like to hang out. And we're there till probably about 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was just a very different experience. And we had so much fun and seen so many moths I had never even dreamed of seeing before. It was like thousands in Ontario. It was so exciting. Here we are working with a corporate group. So a lot of corporate groups like to give back to the community, reciprocate, you know. So they have these corporate days where they get everyone coming out, and there's drinks and there's barbecue and all that kind of stuff. And it's amazing. You know, these are folks from General Electric, as it was then, you know, just to come out and spend that time in nature, you know, and work together and just leave this forest behind. I think they planted, it was like 500 trees that morning. It was just insane. It was amazing. Now we got them. So there's all different ways of engaging people, right? So this is a little bit more involved. It's been working with the school board. It took a couple of years, but they basically got some school programs together that brought kids of all ages from the school board out to the land and teaching them and doing those nature hikes and doing the ecological restoration, all those things of actually getting your hands in the soil and experiencing and being out in nature. I shared this before. I think I'll just share it again because this girl's repulsed. We're making just smelly drinks from the things we find in the forest and giving names to them, but they're just like having so much fun, you know, so much fun in the forest. It's wonderful. This is a bunch of teenagers. In fact, there's some teenagers watching them, but usually it's actually a group of grade 3 kids. So I'm actually teaching these teenagers to be the teachers. You know, even though they goof off and stuff often, but as soon as the little kids arrive, they would be on their best behavior. And we did this drama telling the story of what the forests were like before settlers, and kids are being logs and they're being carried away as logs, and the animals are being displaced. And then there's people that come back and start planting trees and actually helping nature. So it's such a great drama narrative. And then we do a lot of stream work. doing benthic studies. And so these girls' responsibility was to make as much mud as possible with their feet, while others downstream collected with nets with little benthics and stuff like that, and people seeing crayfish for the first time and stoneflies and all sorts of wonderful things. And look how happy they are. I love it. And this continuum, so you work with the young kids, you bring them out, you bring them to the same place again at grade 7, you bring them to the same place again at grade 9, and you come back to grade 11 as well. So there's like, they mature, they see the same space, they see the results of their actions, and you just really continue that flow. Collaboration, this is the green legacy. When I used to work for the county nursery, and this was the army. This was going to be the biggest fight for climate change here as well. It's like, look at all these troops ready to go. So there's a whole bunch of cedar there, but there was like 150,000 trees in this nursery. So we plant those trees. I mean, there's a native nursery at Ignatius now, and there's trees from the Green Legacy. And as a non-for-profit organization, the funding, we've got support from the county for area rehabilitation and all sorts of different things. We couldn't do it without that support. The amount of plant stock I've been able to get through the county nurseries, which seeds we've given back as well, has made this whole thing possible. So in the last 5 years, we put about 10,000 trees and shrubs in, and the landscape has completely changed. And a lot of the trees are over my head already. It's amazing. And then with that, the Green Legacy, they grow seeds in the classroom with the little kids. It's that continuum again. The 5th and 6th grades will come out to the nursery, and that they would help with the tree care, and the grade 7 and 8s will come back onto the land, into farmer fields and riparian edges and stuff like that, and they would come and plant all these trees. And this is an old field meadow, the Old Growth Forest project. This whole thing is full of trees, mostly over my head now. And this is what it looked like only a few years ago. It's awesome. So then as in the monitoring and the research, this is working with the Soil Health Coalition. So we're looking at water infiltration and how that relates to watershed function. We're actually doing some biochar treatments on soils. We've been measuring the organic content of the soils. So this is citizen science things coming in. We're training people how to do soil science and take samples and all that kind of stuff, and measure that water infiltration and how you can improve it over the years. It was mostly meant for agriculture, but this project was really suited to it as well. Here's Trout Unlimited again with this net, doing benthic studies in the streams, and that informs us as well. So they need to know what species there, the health of the stream, the temperature of the stream, the flow of the stream, and the species. And the latest work with, here we go, this was electrofishing here, and we're just getting to see some of these fish I hadn't seen, like close up before. So I've learned so much myself. And then the latest project here, Erica here, is doing eDNA testing. So finding those traces of DNA in the water, so we don't have to do the electrofishing or be so invasive about it, but we can know the presence of species in there. And this was done, the studies that were done, this is in Marlin Creek on the edge of the city. After the dam has been taken out, we found 24 species of fish. We're about a minute from Canadian Tire. There's 24 species of fish swimming by, and no one really knows it. It's awesome. This is a really nice one, because this is engaged. You don't have to be present for this. This is like the iNaturalist. You get these great phone apps now. So if you're looking to identify species, iNaturalist, we have the project page attached to iNaturalist. So any observations that you make in the Old Growth Forest project, outside the ones that we've done already, and there's thousands of species, it's amazing. Then they can be logged here, and you can see on the map where people have found them, the date they found them. They get verified by other biologists as well, and it's such a great visual of what biodiversity. And you can see the city squeezing in on either side, but you've got all this life right in the middle of it. Such a great citizen science approach. And then I'm just going to finish with this. I think it's the last few slides. This is the Burns Drive project. So this is collaborating with a community in Guelph, where they have this little patch of, it has been neglected forest, and it's full of invasives and buckthorn and place with garbage and needles and all sorts of stuff, and this is very central to where all these kids and families live. So we've been working with the city of Guelph and this community to find ways in which these kids and the families that live there and the individuals become better stewards of this little place. So basically, we're giving this forest lots of TLC, lots of love. And to be honest with you, with COVID and everything as well, this has been my favorite thing of the entire year. You know, with the busy schedules, a lot of the parents and working and stuff as well. Actually, it was mostly kids that turned up, like 22 of them below the age of 10. And they worked for hours and hours and hours. And it was so incredible. So but we've helped, we work with the city on how to kind of train up a volunteer leader in the community. So she knows what she's doing. She knows the plants. So the city feel more comfortable with letting the community loose on these lands. And just kind of like building that relationship, basically. And so this was like, yeah, we started off and we made these pathways through the forest from left to right there with the cardboard, and then finally there. And the kids, as soon as this was done, they started running backwards and forwards through this forest. And I even stayed there all afternoon, and they just kept running back and forward. There's one girl was like, "Oh, this is my forest," she said. She was so proud of it. And there they are. We were making seed bombs as well. We had clay and seeds and soil that we were throwing into the forest. And there we are planting trees again. Look at these two young lads at the top there, just digging away with the mulch and stuff like that. Honestly, they didn't stop for hours and got so much work done, and were so engaged with this piece of forest. And I think it's probably one of my last ones. Look at the age of this guy digging away. I think we're planting a sugar maple in there. So there's like this anticipation of 15, 20 years from now where they can actually tap this with syrup. But anyway, so grateful. It's been such a great thing. And then actually, I think this is the last one. We try and find the just outside the box ways to get people into the forest. And this is a great fundraiser. And this happened over 10 years. And this is called Spring Awakes. And Guelph has such an artistic community that we brought everyone out into the forest. You know, the performers, this is all volunteered their time. And they put on these amazing performances. And these performances, for me, with that place memory, still kind of echo in the forest. I can still see, you know, the girl here playing the banjo, like on this crack willow here. It was just so magical. There's people hanging from trees and all sorts of stuff. And even my own kids are like, "Oh, I don't have to go to work with you, Dad." They were complaining about it, and then they came back and said, "What was that? Did these people live here?" It was such a magical event. And then I'm not going to read through these. I'm just going to put them up there, because then when you see the recording, you can go back on all those things that Tim and Sarina and Judith and Dave, we all spoke about at the beginning. And these are some reflections on those kids in the grade 4s, the grade 8s, the teenagers, the retreatants, on how these things connect them to this place and how they keep them coming back. So I'm just going to do that and leave it on the screen for a couple of minutes, but I guess you can press pause and do one more of those. And I'll do one more of those. And I'm probably going to be done. I think I am done. All right. So I think we're actually finished before 8. So I know we were planning to finish at 8, but I know maybe people have been answering questions in the chat as we've gone. I know I haven't yet, but we can get back to it. You know, via emails as well. But so I think we're just going to wrap things up, and hopefully those questions have gone out to people. And Tim, Sarina, and Dave, if you've had a chance to answer them as we go, or even to, you know, I know we'll do a follow-up email. Those reflections that Molly talked about at the beginning are really important. I know there's really good feedback for us. This whole journey that we've been on during these last 4 sessions are really, really important. The earth and these people that are engaged and educated. This is, I mean, you know, not to be melodramatic about it, this is our last chance of getting this right. And it's going to need everybody to do this, right? So I remember I lived with my grandparents, and my grandmother said, you know, the war was a terrible thing, Martin, but everyone mucked in, everyone joined in, everyone worked together, and everyone took care. Even the process of growing food and digging up potatoes was part of the whole effort, you know. So each of us have our gifts in which to do this, you know. Hopefully this journey's been a really rich one. I know it has been for me, and that's probably why I haven't answered any questions if there was any directed at me, because I've been too busy listening. And so yeah, it's that time to say goodbye. And unfortunately we don't have one next week, but what we do have though is everyone's contacts, and hopefully, as I said, there's no endpoint to this journey. This is a learning journey, and like getting together. I know some people say, well, is there any practical things we can do? We can come out and learn how to do these things. I know there's a whole bunch of people that are heading to Manitoulin, it seems, this summer to help you, Judith, and you know, and support all the work we've done and all the great things that Sarina and Dave are doing in the Kitchener-Waterloo and Guelph area. Tim, for all your research and everything you do for that community as well. Yeah, I'm gonna stop chatting, which is hard for me to do, but I'm really grateful, and hopefully we'll see some of you in person sometime soon. Okay, good night.